Hello everyone, in this video I will be showing you the errors of the document Dignitas Infinita from the professional blasphemer and notorious mystical porn author Cardinal Tucho Fernandez, who gave a speech on the 17th of February 2025. Now, he's made some comments on his latest sexual masterpiece yet, that being Dignitas Infinita, which claims that all men have infinite dignity, as per the title alludes. In Dignitas Infinita, the dicastery for the doctrine of the destruction of faith boldly asserts that every human person possesses an infinite dignity, inalienably grounded in his or her very being. It even cites Pope Francis's words that God's infinite love confers upon men and women an infinite dignity. But the reason of this idea of infinite dignity is erroneous because God alone is infinite. Phil Lawler says, quote, "Take the title for starters, infinite dignity. God has infinite dignity, man does not," unquote. St. Thomas Aquinas tells us in his lesser-known work, Opuscula 1, Compendium Theologiae, quote, "This leads to the consideration of God's infinity. God is not infinite by way of privation, according to which infinity is a passion of quantity. In this sense, something is called infinite, which naturally would have a limit by reason of its genus, but does not. Rather, God is infinite negatively, as a thing is called infinite that is in no way limited. For no act is found to be limited except by a potency that is receptive of the act. Thus we observe that forms are limited in accordance with the potency of matter. Hence, if the first mover is an act, without any admixture of potency, since it is not the form of any body or a force inhering in a body, it must be infinite," unquote. So the idea of man being of infinite dignity is outlawed simply by the fact that a creature admixture of act and potency already has finitude, namely due to the fact that we are created beings. The constant repetition of infinite in this document is already misleading. Before Vatican II, we would typically say, sure, human dignity is of immense value and precious because of the grace God gives us. But that doesn't come anywhere close to actual infinity, does it? Nowhere do we become godlike because of our apparent infinite dignity. But funnily enough, Tucho Fernandez, being the professional porn-crazed blasphemer he is, cites the Summa Theologica in the citations of his speech as seen in the Vatican website. Fernandez seems to be risking the distinction between God and man, much like the risk he talks about when gender reassignment comes into the question of human dignity being risked. Another topic worth mentioning is that during the preconciliar time, we held Mary to be of great dignity that far surpasses that of ordinary men on account of her being the Immaculate Mother of God who redeemed all of mankind. Remember what Pope Pius XII has told us in his encyclical Ad Regina Caeli, Ad Caeli Reginam, quote, "From early times Christians have believed, and not without reason, that she of whom was born the Son of the Most High received privileges of grace above all other beings created by God," followed by, "When Christians reflected upon the intimate connection that obtains between a mother and a son, they readily acknowledged the supreme royal dignity of the Mother of God," unquote. That's taken from paragraph 8 of the aforementioned cyclical. No sane conformist would ever dare to think of exalting themselves above the Mother of God. So according to Tucho Fernandez, who is the fallen man to be of infinite dignity, when not even Our Lady, the Queen of Heaven, has infinite dignity, but rather we would attribute a quasi-infinite dignity. Here is a quote according to Catholic culture commentators on Pope Pius XI's devotion to Our Lady. Quote, "Therefore, the dignity of being Mother of God is a quasi-infinite dignity, as we just saw from the words of Pius XI, yet the holiness coming from hearing the Word of God and keeping it is something greater still. The dignity of the Mother of God is one of closeness of relation to the infinite." Unquote. Another quote attributed to St. Thomas Aquinas reads as follows, quote, "The Blessed Virgin, by becoming the Mother of God, received a kind of infinite dignity because God is infinite. This dignity, therefore, is such a reality that a better is not possible, just as nothing can be better than God." Unquote. That being said, if the highest creature being Our Lady once had a merely quasi-infinite dignity, it is theologically incoherent to say now that every person has full infinite dignity in themselves. The older teaching implies degrees of honor, that being Mary above all others and God above Our Lady. Whereas the new claim from Tucho Fernandez opposes an absolute equality with God's infinity. This flies in the face of preconciliar magisterium, which always kept a gap between creator and creation. In paragraph 18 of Pope Pius XII's Ad Regina Caelim, he states, quote, "And in other place he speaks of the Queen of the entire human race, faithful to the exact meaning of her name, who is exalted above all things, save only God himself." Unquote. So all these magisterial statements make implicit what St. Thomas and other theologians state explicitly, being that Mary's greatness comes from God. Even so, popes stopped short of calling her infinitely dignified by nature. St. Thomas's formula about her having a kind of infinite dignity carefully hedges. We've already demonstrated that her dignity is in full participation of God's infinite glory, so Mary's exceptional case does not raise the norm for everyone else. The Church taught that original sin has wounded human nature starting from the fall of Adam. Only by Christ's redemption and the grace of Our Lady can we share in heavenly glory. Conservative Novus Ordos like to madly cope by trying to compatibilize Tucho's doctrines with preconciliar thought. So now the question becomes acute when one notes that even Mary's title, the Mother of God, or the Theotokos, was defined precisely to mark her as unique. If the Mother of God needs a title, surely humanity at large does not get the entire divine title of infinite. Our dignity comes from being made in the image of God and participating in existence, and existence is identical to God himself, who is ipsum est subsistens. So because we are participants, our dignity is derivative from God, who is his own existence, essence, goodness, and so on. The infinity that angels possess is that they're not composed of parts like we are. But that does not mean immaterial substances possess infinitude in the substance of their being. In another aspect, whiteness as a form is infinite insofar as it isn't confined to one subject. In other words, an abstract concept like numbers can be thought of as infinite, but only exists insofar as it gives a formative principle to something. To put it in an analogy, angels and humans, by extension, are infinite from below, also known as no matter limits their form, but are finite from above, meaning that our existence is limited. By Fernandez's logic, all the saints and Our Lady lose their uniqueness because we all possess infinite dignity. What an incredible blasphemy! But that's not the end of what this charlatan has uttered. Listen to this. Quote, "It follows that any sex change intervention, as a rule, risks threatening the unique dignity the person has received from the moment of conception." I'll read it again. "It follows that any sex change intervention, as a rule, risks threatening the unique dignity the person has received from the moment of conception." That's taken from paragraph 60 of Dignitas Infinita. So if you didn't catch it yet, I'll make it clear. This does not outright ban gender reassignment surgeries or contradict human dignity, much less threaten it. They only risk threatening it, and only then as a general rule, and therefore not in every case. Let's take a look at what he said here in his Cologne conference back in February 17, 2025. Quote, "When the document says, as a rule, this does not exclude the possibility of there being cases that fall outside the norm, such as severe dysphoria, which can lead to an unbearable life and even suicide. These exceptional situations must be evaluated with great care." Unquote. Well, there you have it. The moral abominable evil of gender reassignment surgery admits of exceptions according to Fernandez, meaning it is not wrong inherently, but it depends on the circumstance. By Fernandez's line of logic, if a man's life or a woman's life is unbearable and tempts him or her with suicide unless they commit an atrocious sin such as adultery, abortion, fornication, watching pornography, etc., then it is morally acceptable provided the man or woman has prayerfully discerned the matter with great clarity. Grammatically, this means that the statement that any sex change intervention risks threatening dignity is only general and not absolute. Any qualifier, such as a rule or risks, weakens a moral norm. Vatican documents have long taught that some acts are intrinsically evil without exceptions, but Fernandez's language makes these acts merely general disordered, allowing personal circumstances to override the moral law that God has written in the hearts of all men. Furthermore, the excuse of unbearable suffering is a classical case of guilt tripping, or in other words, have pity on me trap. And if you have keen rhetorical knowledge, you can see that this type of logic is clearly a slippery slope. Pope Pius XII once examined a similar argument about marital sex, noting that just because people may say a law is impossible, it doesn't make it so God does not command what is impossible, but he will give the grace to carry his commands. In other words, feeling that one cannot endure something doesn't mean the laws of God makes exceptions. That's just nonsense. Duccio makes a semi-Pelagian error by thinking human judgment can trump moral law provided on a personal circumstance, but that's just a load of bunko. As Pope Pius XII said, he warns you to do what you can and to ask his aid for what is beyond your powers, and he gives his help to make that possible for you. Unquote. And thus, by Fernandez's reasoning, any penitent could claim extreme despair as a license for sin. The horrors of this blatant heresies are out in the open, but Fernandez, being the slickster he is, couches his errors neatly under ambiguous language. How horrifying. Pray for an end to Vatican II and her reforms. God bless.